And we should be going live now. Camera is all set up. Hopefully, I just got to make sure that I can see myself proper in the little YouTube window here, but I think we're almost live. Yeah, okay. And we should be going live. Great, I can see myself, so that's awesome. Hi everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Polars, World of Warcraft, and Altair, and in particular, we're going to talk about this one notebook that I made. It is, let me just grab the right screen. It is this one. I have a personal goal for this stream, and that is that I want to do way less ums and ahs. I looked at my previous stream, and I just noticed that I have a lot of the, oh, let's check out the, all of that. So if you are in the crowd and you would like to point out to me that I'm doing that, feel free to totally do so. But what I want to talk about today is this one slightly amazing data set that I found on Kaggle. It is the World of Warcraft avatar data set. And this is also the data set that we're going to use as an excuse to explore both Polars and Altair a fair bit, and also how you can combine the two Marimo in nice ways. But in general, this is just a really fun data set to just talk about, so I want to maybe do that first. So the whole point of this data set is you have, of World of Warcraft, I should say, is you have all these different servers. And with most online video games, you could look at a server as a place where a group of people reside. But if your character is on one server, it also means that they are not on another server. So it's a kind of an island, you could say. This data set contains, I think, 2 years of data on one World of Warcraft server around 2007, 2008. And these are all characters from the Horde faction. So in World of Warcraft, famously, you've got the Horde and you've got the Alliance. And the whole thing here is that we're just talking about Horde characters. But the whole thing is that these are access logs. So you can imagine there's this one character. This is character 46340. This is a character. And this character, at this point in time, was logged into the server. This character was in a guild number 53. This character also was a certain level, and in particular, this was a orc hunter who was in Razor Friend Crawl. This is a place, I suppose. So I have this one parquet file that has about this, 36 million rows, and the whole name of the game here is that you can be playing, and this is something I think I want to draw, because this is an important aspect that we're going to totally use all over the place later, but TL draw is kind of nice for this. But what you can imagine is there's this timeline, let's say, and again, time, right? Time moves forward. Let's get the normal pen. Time, let's make it a bit thick. Yeah, that'll do it. And let's say that you're playing for a certain segment. This is like maybe Monday, and then here's another session that you're doing on Tuesday, right? So this is time when you're playing the video game. The whole point of this data set is that it's trying to log every 10 minutes or so. I believe it's 10 minutes. Could be like maybe 10 and a few seconds, but that's the whole point, that it's like a very evenly timed data set. So you've got all these moments when we're going to check, hey, is this person still around? And if they are, then these are the moments that we are logging. So you get these 10-minute intervals, basically, that can tell us if someone was or was not online, in fact. And when they are online, we also know their level, and we know where in the World of Warcraft they exactly were. We also know at that point of time if they were part of a guild. I could be wrong, but I believe in World of Warcraft you can only be part of one guild at a time. But this is what the dataset represents. For every character that you have on a server, we have these moments in time. So that's good to know. That also means that we don't, there's a whole lot of stuff that we don't see in particular. But given this data set, there's a few things that are just interesting that you can maybe calculate. One thing that I think is going to be particularly useful whenever you're dealing with, I guess, logs of data like this, is that one very big use case is you want to be able to distinguish different sessions. So you got to imagine the way that we look at the data is we just see these points over time. But if there's a big break in between, like what you have over here, then you could argue, well, this was a gaming session and this was a gaming session, and we would like to be able to identify those. So we need to write some sort of a query that allows us to declare that this gap over here is big enough that the user probably stopped playing in between. The thinking here is that, of course, we can then calculate things like what's the average session length? How many sessions does a user have per month? And these sorts of things can also be quite useful if you want to detect bots. And that's like one of the main reasons why you want to have sessions around. For example, if we find that there is a player that on average has sessions that are 20 hours long, right, that's not normal behavior. That's a signal that we can probably deem a user to be something of a bot, let's say. You can also calculate some of those statistics without resorting to sessions, right? But having a session around just makes a lot of this stuff a whole lot easier. Not to mention the fact that for marketing purposes, knowing things about a session is also just inherently kind of useful. Like, when do we have longer sessions in the weekend? And if so, how much longer? And things like this. But anyway, this is context. It's very important to know when you're going to do data analysis. Are we even sure what's in the data, right? But this is the thing that we're going to be playing with. So hopefully that adds a little bit of context of what we're seeing here. So what I also hope is clear is that this combination of the player identifier and this combination of this date time, those two things together, they are going to be very important when we're going to go and construct sessions, and these are going to be very important when we're going to try and calculate some interesting things. Now, before we're going to go deep and make like a proper pipeline that's going to calculate these sessions for us, what I figured we might be able to do first is just calculate some fun things, also to get our feet wet. I want to talk a little bit about the Polars API and why I've been a fan of that thing for years at this point. So, okay. First thing that's just kind of fun to calculate. What I've got here is a small Polars pipeline. Let's just zoom in on that just a little bit, just so people can see it's nice and big. Okay, so this is a chain of Polars commands, right? So I start up with my one data frame at the beginning, and the whole point of the Polars API is that you can chain commands together. You're basically doing this thing called method chaining in Python. You start out with a data frame, you call out a method, what comes out over here is still a data frame, but you're going to call another method on it, etc. What is kind of cool about Polars, especially if you're using a lazy frame, which we're going to do later, but Polars is seeing all of these different commands that we are interested in running, and then Polars is able to think ahead of what might be the optimal query to actually pass on to the backend before actually running anything. And there's a lot of clever things that Polars can do in that regard. But if you're learning Polars, one good way to maybe think about the API is that the data frame is a noun in a sentence, basically, and all these methods that you follow, those are kind of like verbs. And if you think about it that way, it becomes a whole lot easier to reason about what a Polars pipeline is typically doing. So we start with a data frame, and then we add a group to the data frame. We're going to group by a player ID, and there's a couple of verbs that we can follow up with that are going to calculate things using a group. And my favorite one is this one called len. This is going to calculate just a count per group that we've got. And what I'm also saying is, okay, great that we've got that count, but I'm only interested in having player IDs that have more than 1,000 rows. And then I'm going to sort by the number of rows. So this table over here is just a player count table, like how many rows does a player have? And I'm starting with players that don't have too many rows, but also not too little. Like, we have to have more than 1,000, but we don't have millions, right? And that means that this data frame that I've got over here, that is going into this Marimo widget over here that is going to construct me a table. Now, a table in Marimo does something interesting, and it plays really nicely with Polars. Because what I can do, and let me hide this code so you can see the panel below, but I can select something like, oh, I want to select this player, and maybe that one. And what you can see is for the 3 players that I've selected, you can see when they've been active. So every time that there's been activity, there's going to be more lines being drawn. But you can see over time, this one player over here gained a few levels, like their character leveled up a few times. And oh, this other character over here also leveled up, but at a slightly different speed. And oh, there's a different character over here. The really cool thing about using Altair and Polars in Marimo together is that you can really combine the expressive nature of the Polars API to really make it clear what the API should be doing, and like it's really easy for me to reason about the data frame flow, so to say. That also combines really well with Altair, because Altair can just understand Polar's data frames. But the really cool thing, at least to me, is that when I'm trying to understand a data set, it just helps to have a few interactive widgets such that I don't have to write the query all the time. And this one in particular, I thought was just kind of useful. Like, what would this chart look like if I just have a look at a couple of these characters and how they kind of like level up? That you can really see, just by looking at a few of these characters. Oh, this is one character over here that just really levels up like super duper quickly here at the beginning, and then it seems to be slowing down over here as they get higher levels. That's kind of interesting. And it seems like we've got a character over here that maybe stopped playing here. The fact that there's a line here, it might just be that we're connecting two dots that are at the extremes over here. Actually, can I maybe also change this chart a little bit? So this is a this is the code that I need in order to turn this into a line chart. I think this is an Altair chart. I think I can just add two Altair charts together. So I can do scatter here, I think. Oh wait, no, plot dot scatter I think is the API. I'm just curious about this one thing. We're gonna hopefully ignore this in a bit. Yeah, okay, this is kind of what I expected. So for every so we're still connecting the lines, right? But what I just did over here is I want to make sure that I actually see the moments that the user was actually on the server. Like when there's a connection over here, straight line doesn't tell me that much, but now I can actually see that, yeah, there was a very long period over here when the player was playing. There was a very long period over here as well. Player came back in the middle, and there's a few moments there as well. But you can see that there's that session behavior that I mentioned earlier. That's also something that you can see over here. Let's just select a few more characters and then we'll move on. But what I hope is that people can look at this and that they can kind of agree. It's very nice to be able to combine interactive widgets because they really do allow you to play with the data just a little bit. So this is first point I want to make. Like, the thing that's really powerful here isn't the fact that, oh, Polars has a nice API and, oh, Altair is great. They are. But the fact that you can combine the two and that you're able to combine it with widgets, that makes for very good data exploration, if you ask me. So that's the first point I wanted to drive home. I guess, feel free to ask questions, by the way. Like, if there's questions, I'll happily answer them in line. What I think I want to do now first is also just quickly explain the trick that I just pulled off. So I very quickly also added some dots over here instead of just lines. Like, how did I do that? Okay, so this is what I had before. Yeah, shortcuts are always annoying when you're doing ergo keyboard stuff like I do. So this is what we had before. And just to make it clear, I have my normal data frame, and then I'm saying, okay, let's filter, and let's only grab the player IDs that I've selected on top. And then I'm calling .plot. And this is sort of more of a Polar's way of hooking into Altair. But this gives me a shorthand way to generate a Altair chart. And I can call .plot and then .line. And this is going to basically be a shortcut for me not to have to write somewhat longer Altair code. But what comes out over here is a Altair chart. So I can use the Altair API from there on forward. And the thing with Altair charts that's just kind of nice and interesting, if I have, let's say, some sort of chart 1, let's actually do this a nice way. So this is, let's call this chart 1. What I can do is I can also generate some sort of a chart 2. Open bracket, close bracket. Let's also do that here just for keeping things clean. Yep. But what you can do in Altair, not a lot of people know this, but you can actually use operators to combine charts together. And if you do the plus operator, then you're gonna just put two charts on top of each other. You're gonna take the points that are made in this chart, and you're gonna take the points that are made in the other chart, and you're just gonna put them in the same space. What you can also do is use the bar operator instead, and that's gonna put two charts next to each other. You don't always want this. In this particular case, I really wanted to overlay the two charts, but you can also imagine that there are good reasons to have something like this. Another thing you can also do is put them under each other, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was ampersand. Yeah, so ampersand allows you to put two charts under each other. But this is a cool trick from Altair. They've overloaded some of the operators, such as you combine charts in sort of pretty interesting and also I would also argue like pretty easy to remember ways. Like this is an operation I tend to do a lot, especially because sometimes I'm not just interested in seeing the line, also I want to see the dot. So for those use cases, tricks like this are just genuinely kind of useful. So just remember, if you're using Altair, there is this operator overloading thing that you can also use, which is quite neat. People are noticing that I'm using polars. Yes, we're doing everything with polars today. I will also admit, for the longest time, I've for my personal work, I switched to polars like, I think it's 4 years ago at this point. I was definitely one of the first polars users. We're going to see in a moment a method in polars that I use all over the place that I actually implemented. I'm going to brag about that. I actually was one of the core features of polars got added by me. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But having said all this, definitely pandas is definitely, if I think about pandas and what they did, it's definitely still cool because it brought a data frame object to the Python ecosystem, which is great. It's just that I think personally the API of polars is just so much nicer. Not to mention the fact that it's quicker. So if you haven't already, do give polars a serious spin. It is amazing. And especially these days, it compiles to WASM. It also supports Altair. So it kind of feels like maybe 5 years ago, the modern Python stack will be like pandas and matplotlib and pip. And it kind of feels these days like we've moved on. It's UV now, and it's polars now, and it's Altair. And I don't want to dismiss those old tools because a lot of them just work fine and they're still maybe worth to learn. It's just that I would definitely invest time in these new tools just because they're so much fun to play with. But anyway, looking at this chart, I was immediately curious. I still want to calculate sessions later, right? I want to go there, but I'm just going to select a few other characters. I'm just kind of hoping we're able to find like one character that really has this one property. Let's just not select the blue one. Yeah, let's just maybe go to characters that have a few more points. Yeah, so this might be a nice example. And let's just go to like page somewhere over here. Then we have a player that really has a lot of points. Right, so you see a couple of lines kind of really go up fast here, right? Maybe just a little bit. Let's now go to one that's a little bit more at the end. Yeah, somewhere over here. No, that's too much. Maybe over here. I don't know. Maybe this one. Who knows? Yeah, so one thing that's interesting, at least to me, right? It seems like some characters, like this one over here, it's not growing super fast. But some of these other ones, like this one, oh boy, this one is really growing fast. I was kind of wondering, is there a reason for it? One reason could be because it's a bot and they're just playing way more. But there's this thing about World of Warcraft where, as a character, you also have a class. And back when I was in high school, 20 years ago, I used to play this game. There was kind of this meme where some characters would just be very good at leveling up quite quickly, and some other characters were just very bad. In particular, hunters and rogues, they were really good at leveling up because they were really good at dealing damage, and they didn't have a lot of health points, so a potion could heal them up really quick, and they could go on and kill another enemy. Whereas warriors had a lot hard, like they had much more hardship, simply because of the fact that a warrior is meant as a tank. Like they're meant to be able to withstand a lot of damage, but they're not really great at dealing a whole lot of them. So if you're doing solo quests on your own and you're trying to kill like all these boars in the forests, the warrior just has a whole like worse time at it simply because it can't kill all these creatures, I guess you could say. So I figured let's go for a kind of advanced chart. And I think what I want to do is I want to explain the query first, and then I'll talk about the chart. Because I think the chart is amazing, but this is one of those queries that you have to plan a little bit. So the chart that I wanted to make is if this is, let's say, the level that you are on as a character, what I kind of want to have is just the time that it takes you in that level. So basically what I really would like to calculate is how much time it took to level up. But what I could do is I could say something along the lines of, well, if I just calculate all the time that you are in a specific level, then one way of thinking about that is the amount of time that you can take to level up. So I just have to calculate all of these separate buckets, and that might give me the chart that I'm interested in. However, I don't just want to do that per level. I would also really like to be able to do that for, let's say, a warrior, and maybe a different line for a rogue. And my hypothesis would be that it would take more time for a warrior to level up to level 60 than it would for a rogue. This is my hypothesis. Okay, that's the battle plan. And I realized that my face is semi in the chart over here. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. But again, it's level on the x-axis and time it takes on the y-axis. And there's like hopefully a warrior line. And there's hopefully a rogue line. I hope this is better. Anyway, the reason I specifically take the time to mention this is, especially if you're learning polars, the hard bit isn't usually the API. The API is pretty easy to learn. Usually the harder part of being very fluent with data frame APIs is that you have to take the time to solve the query on paper before you actually start writing it right away. A mistake that a lot of, I will call them juniors, make is that they immediately start writing the code. Well, instead, it might be a lot more sensible to just doodle what their final end result is hopefully going to be. So in this case, I knew that I wanted to have level on the x-axis, and I wanted to have a line per something. So okay, that tells me that I now know how to group, because I need to group per level and I need to group by class. And what I'm then also going to need is I need to calculate how many rows were in there. So I'm going to have to calculate the length of each different group. And that's going to, like, every row is basically 10 minutes. Well, that's a rough assumption. It roughly matches reality. And okay, that tells me how much total time has been spent in the level character bucket, but the level class bucket, but there's still many characters that are in there. So I should also divide by the number of total characters that I've got. So inside of polars, what you can do is you can say, well, this is the length, that's the number of rows, but there's also this aggregator, number of unique, and you can just give it the name of a column. So I'm calculating the unique number of players per class and per level. Then afterwards, I'm removing level 60, level 70, and level 80. I'll show you in a bit why. And then I'm calculating the number of hours per character by taking this length that I calculated and dividing that by the number of characters. This is in number of rows, and each row is 10 minutes. And I do that, and I calculate the hours by just dividing that by 6. Because if I should I divide by 6? Yes, because if I have 6 rows, that's 1 hour, so that makes sense. So that's the whole query, and this is what the final result looks like. And if you are a World of Warcraft player in this era, this is a super duper interesting chart, and I'm going to try to explain to you why. But hopefully it's clear how we got here, right? Like we calculated the data frame that we needed, and then at the end we just say, okay, on the x-axis take the level, y-axis is hours per character, and the color of each line needs to be the class, and that's what you see over here. Okay, right off the bat, we see that there are a couple of class names that are dirty. I don't know what caused them to go in here, but there's a number here and I believe a Chinese character, another number in here. So we're dealing with some dirty data. We have to keep that in the back of our mind. But, okay, cool though as this is, we notice that it takes not a lot of time to level up if you have a low level, but it takes a lot of time to level up if you're a high level. And also notice that the differences between leveling up times aren't that big here, but the moment you get to level 50, oh man, it really starts to make a difference. And if I look on top over here, what is this orange line? Well, that is actually the, I think it's the warrior class, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe if I can hover over there. Yeah, these are the warriors. These are really taking their time to properly level up. And if I have a look at the ones that are a little bit more speedy, and over here, we've got the Paladin, the Druid, and the Warlock. Not the classes I would have expected, but there's a clear difference between which characters are, like the speed at which some of these characters are leveling up. Now, there is, let's remove these lines just for now. So there's this filtering thing I was doing here. Let's just comment that out, and let's just have a look at how different this chart becomes. When I do that, you're going to notice that, oh, geez, For some weird reason, it seems like you got to spend a lot of time to level up from level 60. And you got to spend a lot of time to level up from level 70. Oh, and the same thing for level 80. What is happening here? The thing with this dataset is that this dataset is taken over a span of 3 years, during which a couple of expansion packs came out. And before the first expansion pack came out, level 60 was the maximum level that you could get. And the same thing over here. I think this was the Frozen Throne or the... No, I think it was the Burning Legion one. I forget. But for a brief period, level 70 was the highest level you could get. And then level 80 was the highest level. But okay, this is not people leveling up. This is just for a long period of time, this was the highest level that you could get. So these are, for the purposes of this chart, excellent candidates to just completely ignore. We don't need to do anything with these. Now, there's one extra thing that's just kind of interesting that you might not expect, but hopefully the expansion pack does make that clear, is you would expect that, you know, it takes more and more time to level up, but apparently once you reach level 70, oh, then it doesn't take a lot of time to level up anymore. What's up with that? I think this was the Frozen Throne expansion, I'm not sure, but I believe what Blizzard ended up doing is they basically said, well, for the World of Warcraft video game, leveling up shouldn't be the fun. Being the max level and then playing around in the end game section, that is what we're going to optimize our games for. So they made it a lot easier to level up. So that's something you also see reflected over here. In fact, I think in this expansion, they released this new class called the Death Knight. And you can really just see the Death Knight starts at level 55. And that character just has a lot of speed in their like they have a lot of tailwind in order to level up. So that's also something kind of interesting that you can see in the chart over here. Notice that a lot of stuff that I'm explaining here can only be done if you have some sort of business knowledge, which is also something you see in, business. Like domain knowledge really matters. But I still think this is a very insightful chart in general, just because there's so much opportunity to ask follow-up questions. Like, why is there a huge dip over here? And, oh, what's up with this Death Knight class? And why is there a difference between warriors and warlocks? So this is also what you really want to spend a lot of time on. Like, you want to interactively explore your data set, try to understand the story inside of that before you do any machine learning with it. We're going to try and do that in a bit, but this is also stuff that I live for. Like this data mining, that's still, I think, a really cool part of the profession. Like find an interesting data set, really try to understand the story. And Polars and Altair just really are amazing tools to help you with that these days. I'm curious, actually, now that I think of it, Marimo has this Altair chart widget. Does that work here? Marimo Altair chart. Yeah, because I think if I, doesn't that give me, yeah, exactly. So there's this really cool utility that we can, I forgot to do that earlier. So what you can do with Marimo, you can add this Altair chart wrapper around a, Altair chart, basically. And that gives you a couple of extras. If this were a scatter chart, you'd be able to make like selections in your scatter chart. But one of the extra things that that widget also allows you to do is it just allows you to very quickly select. Can I select more than one? No, unfortunately I can't. But you can make a selection in the legend. So if you want to quickly select one line segment, it's also something that you can quite quickly do. Yeah, again, the Death Knight, that's a special case. The warriors all the way on top. And hunters, are they? Oh, hunters turn out to be some of the slower ones. Did not expect that, actually. And rogues also. Huh, okay. If you want to level up quickly, I guess, be a paladin. That's one thing we seem to be learning. Don't know why. I'm curious if there's a reason for it. Don't know if there's World of Warcraft players in the in the live stream, but if there are, and if you have an explanation for it, do let me know. But anyway, this is interesting. Hopefully, the point that I'm that is very clear now is that hey, yeah, you want to combine charts, you want to do stuff with data frame APIs, all that stuff is good. I did one extra chart that is similar to what you saw before, and this one also was just kind of interesting to me. So, you know, in World of Warcraft, you can join a guild, and effectively that means that either you play together with like your crew and you try to hunt dragons together, or you try to do it on your own. And I was kind of wondering, like, if you're in a guild, does that make it quicker for you to level up, or does that make it slower? Because initially I was thinking, oh, if you have buddies to play with and they help you, you know, beat the very hard boss, then maybe you level up quicker. Turns out that that's actually not the case. It turns out that if you are really in a guild, that it's just way more spiky, actually. Now, there's all sorts of bias here. Like, this might be something that changed over time, and I'm not capturing that at all. But if I were to just do a blunt average, it does seem like being in a guild actually slows you down a bit. And part of me was wondering why that might be. One reason could be that if you are in a guild, you are just playing the game and you're just having more fun. You are just not worried about leveling up as quickly as possible. Whereas if you're playing on your own, like you can't do a dungeon on your own, you're probably going to do less of that. So then leveling up might actually be the reason that the game is fun. This is a hypothesis. I would have to dive deeper into the data, but I do think this is a very nice chart because again, it's a chart that was sparked by curiosity that helps me ask better questions immediately after. Like visualization is really good at that, and that's a step that people sometimes forget. But everything that we've been doing so far. Oh yeah, this is also something I calculated. So I'm able to calculate the amount of like per level, the amount of time it takes to level up, so to say. What I figured I might do is let's just take the sum, because what I can then do is I can calculate how much total hours do you have to spend per class in order to level up. And I thought that was just kind of interesting too. So it turns out if you want to level up a warrior to level 60 back in 2007, it would take you roughly 285 hours. And I've actually, this is according to my data. I checked some online resources and I actually found a forum where someone was saying, yeah, leveling to level 60 took me 290 hours. So these numbers are fairly accurate. So yeah, just to also emphasize how much time people spent playing this video game in the early 2000s, right? It is a big number. And let's maybe just calculate that. If I were to take 290 hours, if I were to assume an 8-hour workday, and if I were to assume a 5-day work week, this might take you 2 months of full-time work in order to get a character up to level 60, right? So they were really spending a lot of time playing this video game. That's also what makes this data set so interesting. People actually took this somewhat serious. Let's have a quick look at the time. Okay, we're half an hour in. So at this point in time, what you're probably thinking, or what I'm hopefully conveying, is that Polars is useful, Altair is definitely useful, and Marimo, you can definitely go nuts. But maybe we should take a step back and also be a bit formal and think a little bit about, how do you actually write proper Polars pipelines or data frame pipelines just in general? Because, I'm kind of in a way YOLOing here, right? Like I'm basically just saying, oh, there's a cell over here and I want to make a chart. Let's just quickly go ahead and write it. But there were also just a couple of hints that maybe we should be more formal about it. And the main one is actually over here. Like I'm definitely making charts and that's cool, but we also see that there's some dirty data in here. One way to think about it is, if you're doing initial work, that could be fine. But imagine now that we've got this super interesting chart. Oh, I made a typo, I think. Oh yeah. Better now? Yeah, typo. Still a typo. Let's just do the original chart. Oh. There we are. But imagine like in a real life business scenario, right? Like you've got this amazing chart and then you want to send it off to like business users to make an optimal decision about something. Then you better know for sure that the data that you're using here is appropriate. And we've not done any proper data cleaning. So there is something to be said to maybe have some sort of a system that allows us to easily make sure we all apply the data cleaning in the same way. Especially when we consider it's not just stuff like this, there's also bots in here, right? And if you're interested in reporting leveling up statistics, I don't know, maybe all the bots are paladins or something like that. And if that's the case, we'd like to know. So if I were to then quickly go to our drawing tool one more time, and let's get nice thick lines, then let's just consider like what we maybe would like to do in a pipeline. Like we for sure want to start out with our original data frame. That's cool. But then if I think about like, not about implementation, but just sentences or descriptions of steps that usually have to take place, well, the data frame, typically we have to maybe clean the column names or the columns or something like that. Make sure that uh, we have the right types and things like that. We have dates properly instead of strings and things like this. Then another thing that I might want to do then afterwards is after we've made sure that we've got some clean data, a good next step might be to maybe remove odd rows or oddities. Back when I was at eBay, a thing that we actually used to do is we had this one PM, and he would basically have his own mini blog, and he would just track whenever there was something weird happening on a given day. So there would be some sort of outage or some sort of database behaved weirdly, and he would just meticulously write down on what dates we would probably be safest to remove data. Because if something weird was happening with, I don't know, the ad system, and therefore the recurring revenue numbers were twice as high as they were supposed to be, then yeah, you don't want to do anything with click-through calculations to figure out if your A/B test was right using bad data. So if you have good reasons to remove data, that's also a step you want to add quite early. Another thing you maybe also want to do at this point is sessionize. Like you want to add a session ID to your data. And after that, you probably want to remove some of the bots. I will not go into detail, but at the same client back at eBay, we actually had this awkward moment when we were calculating pretty important numbers for like, hey, how well does this algorithm perform? And different teams were doing recommender things and the ad platform stuff. And then kind of awkwardly, we realized that different teams had different mechanisms for sessionization and also different mechanisms and definitions for removing bots. And then you could almost wonder, well, we're reporting statistics here. Oh, yeah, someone from Vietnam. Hello. That's all. Oh, okay. This is the first time I think I see someone from Vietnam tune in. So that's amazing. Hi, welcome. But yeah, like you get into all sorts of crazy stuff when people are doing things with their data, but team A has sessionized method 1 and team B has sessionized method 2. That's a situation you really, really want to prevent. So actually, what's kind of nice, what I'm describing here, is this is kind of a nice sequence of steps that you could call the clean pipeline. And what you could do is you could maybe centralize this in some way. You could say, well, we've got one function that's going to be the standard way for us to clean our data. But the cool thing is that if we can all agree on that we have something like this, then from here, we can tackle use case 1, we can tackle use case 2, poorly drawn 1 there. We can do maybe churn analysis. We can maybe do analysis on when the servers are going to get the most traffic, but only when we're sure that we're all using the same definition in a way. Then it can be useful to maybe go through with some of these use cases. And I do realize that if one of the use cases is just traffic spikes, then maybe you don't want to remove the bots, right? So there's still a little bit of wiggle room here. But the argument that I'm mainly making is you want to have these building blocks. You don't want to write Polar's code in a way that you don't have these amendable building blocks for what you're doing. You really want to maybe turn this into a function. And this is going to bring me to my bragging rights. I'm going to talk about the thing that I added to Polars that I'm super duper proud of, which I think makes Polars code super clean. Because what you can do in Polars is you can define functions. Here's one of them. So I've got this one function called set types. And into this function just goes a data frame, and then all the stuff that needs to happen in order to set the types, that goes into this one function. And in this particular case, I'm doing a little bit of cleaning here as well. But I'm saying, look, let's just add a column, the guild. I'm not necessarily interested in what guild you're in. I'm just interested in, are you in a guild? Yes, no. So I'm turning that into a Boolean. If there's a null value, you're not in the guild. If there is an integer value, then you are in a guild. Okay, so I'm setting the type to bool by doing this. And after that, I'm also making sure that the date timestamp, that those are just proper integers. We'll see in a moment why, but I want them to all be timestamp integers, and that's something I'm also doing. So, okay, types are set. This is something I can do with a function like this. Data frame goes in, data frame goes out. Easy peasy. After that, I have a different function, clean data. And in this function, I'm going to make sure that the classes, for the research that I'm interested in doing for now, let's just not include death knights. Let's not include all of these weird artifacts that we've seen. Similarly, Oh, the races, I saw some weird things happening in there as well. Let's just make sure that we only have trolls, orcs, undead, tauren, and blood elves. Those are the only races that you've got available in World of Warcraft at that time. And again, the point here is that this is also a function. Afterwards, I've got this function called Sessionize. This is going to add sessions. This function is a little bit more special because this function doesn't just accept a data frame, it also has this thing called a threshold that I'll get back to in a bit. So I can definitely add parameters here. But the real thing that is important at this point in time is that I have all these functions. They do something that is kind of like a Lego brick in terms of an operation that they do. And what you can do inside of Polars is you can say, well, take that data frame and then give that to the setTypes function. Out of this comes a new data frame, and then we're going to pipe that through this other pipeline step. This pipe method is something that I added 4 years ago, and it is something I use daily, and I really recommend everyone to just... Oh, wait, someone is watching this on their vacation? That's amazing. Like, okay, so someone in the chat is saying that they're watching this while on holiday in Vietnam. I'm, kind of humbled by that. Feel free to enjoy the beaches and the good food and stuff as well. Like, part of me is, jealous in a way. Good food in Vietnam is probably better than this live stream, if I'm honest. But anyway, still thanks for tuning in. This is how you want to write data frame code. And I cannot stress this enough. Your life will just get so much easier writing pandas or polars or even Spark if you write code this way, because functions like this are just so nice and reproducible. And another thing that's just kind of cool here is, remember that I've got like some functions over here where I could set a threshold value. You can set that threshold value from here as well. So I can pass in arguments and keyword arguments as I see fit. So I can also just add a setting in here. And these functions are great for fine tuning and doing things on a micro level. But by having those functions, you're still able to look at the big pipeline picture and consider the macro level at the same time as well. You can still pass arguments in here, see charts update, and in the case of Marimo, you can even maybe build a little interface around it. But this is how you want to write pipelined, proper data frame code. I cannot stress this enough, and I see plenty of people not do this. Pipelines save your bacon. They really save your time, they save your life, and you can unit test them as well, right? That's also a thing that's amazing about them. You can add a little library of very useful pipeline functions for your organization into a Git repository and have automated tests run through them. So more things go right if you just do this. So I just wanted to have that rant be done with. This is how, like, whenever I do serious work, I start thinking more in pipeline steps and a little bit less in verbs for a data frame, so to say. And I really hope more people would do this and they would follow me in this. I don't want to go too much in depth in all of these things here, but I do think it might make sense to talk about this sessionize function over here. Like, how does that work? Like, how do you add a session? And the reason why I want to mention it is because it's one of those things that is kind of general in a way. Like most companies need to do something with sessions if they're dealing with logs and users. But it's actually not the hardest thing to calculate. So let me just draw, again, we're going to draw the problem and solve it on paper before we write it first, right? So let's just, I want a thick line. There we go. Nice thick line. This is a table. This is what we start with. I have a user ID and I have some sort of a timestamp. And the first step that we're going to do is we're going to sort this. So again, let's assume I've got user A a few times over here, and then I've got user B over here. And let's just have simple timestamps. So this is timestamp 10, this is timestamp 15, this is timestamp 100, and this is timestamp 10, this is 15, this is 20, and this is timestamp 2000, or something like that. These numbers are illustrative, but what you can hopefully imagine is that the dataset that we started with, we can sort that in a way such that it roughly represents what I've drawn here. Well, one thing I can then do is I can calculate the difference between the row and the row before. In this particular case, we would get a not available value on top over here first. And let's draw that a bit nicer. But here the difference would be 5 because the value here is 15. I subtract from that 100. The value here would be 5. And I can do the same thing here. This would be 85, if I'm not mistaken. In this case, it would be minus 90. In this case, it would be 5 again, 5 again. And here will be 1,980. Yes, need to watch my math a bit there. But anyway, this is something I can do. I can calculate this column that says, hey, is there a difference? And actually what I can do from here is I can turn this into a Boolean column. Because what I can do is I can, I mean, the one edge case I can do is whenever there's an NA, let's just put a 0 there. And the next thing I can do is I can say, well, if we ever see a value that's above or below a threshold, let's just add the number 1 here. So in this particular case, I could say, well, if the diff that I see over here is much larger than, oh, let's pick a number, 20, or less than 0, then I'm going to add the number 1 here. And otherwise, I'm going to put the 0 in here. So, okay, we've got 5 here. That's a 0. This would be a 1. This would be a 1, 0, 0, 1. Okay, and then the next step that we do over here, now we're just going to take the cumulative sum. So we're going to go down, and we're just going to take the sum of all the numbers. So this would be 0, add to that 0. Oh, here's a 1, so we're going to add 1 here. Oh, there's another 1 here. Let's add 2 there. This is still 2. This is still 2. Okay, and this is 3. This is your session ID. And if I were to properly draw the buckets, right, this would be a session. This would be a session. And this would be one. And one kind of convenient property is whenever there's a big negative number over here, odds are that that's because we're switching between characters. And another thing that's also just kind of nice is we can set the thresholds ourselves when we make this query over here. And come to think of it, there's actually an edge case we want to worry about, because theoretically it could be the case that we have 2 consecutive user IDs that follow up on each other that just happen to have a very similar timestamp over here, so that could cause confusion. You can wiggle your way around with this one column over here to fix that, but the main point is that it's a combination of looking at these difference values over time, turning that into a Boolean array, and then taking the cum sum as you move downwards. This cumulative sum over here. And yeah, this is a very convenient way in how you can sessionize. The downside of this method, of course, is it's a bit hard to parallelize this because it requires a bit of sorting. So do consider that sessionizing in general is kind of a heavy computation. That's also why sometimes if you want to make this cheaper, one thing that you could do is you could say, well, let's first group by week before we do this, or group by day or something like that. That way you have all these separate groups that can be handled in parallel. But yeah, this is how you sessionize. This is sessionization. It's something that a lot of people do all the time. It's a wheel that tends to get reinvented. But now that we've solved this on paper, it's hopefully also clear how you can maybe work towards the syntax of writing this inside of Polars. That's also kind of a lesson I want to drive home. Like learning Polars in the end is at some point almost not as much syntax. It really is realizing complex queries and being able to chunk them up into bits. And whenever I do tutorials, I always do sessionization because it's just a nice, tangible example, and it's also kind of complex. So it's a bit messy because I got to zoom out over here to really paint the picture completely. But the steps that I just described, right? First, you do your sorting by the player ID, then the timestamp. Then we do something with the columns. The timestamp, we take the difference. If the difference is larger than a certain threshold, then we do something, and that's our time series difference column. I do something similar with a character difference. That's how I caught that edge case. And yeah, then I think over here, there's a new session mark column over here. I'm taking the cumulative sum. I've made a couple of helper columns in between over here. I throw them away at the end, but I do keep my session column. That's something I definitely keep around. That's something that I'm doing. Note, by the way, this notebook is on GitHub. You can check the show notes after the live stream. But yeah, this is how you do sessionization. And one thing that you can do after is once we know for sure that we have sessions available to ourselves, then we can go and add some features. So things like, what's the session length? What's the number of sessions that we have per character, and that sort of a thing. And then I have some features at my disposal that might be useful to remove bots. And the way that I'm going about that is I'm just saying, look, I'm calculating the number of a session length. And what I can then calculate is per character, what is the maximum session length? Like, what's the longest session that you've ever had? And if the longest session you've ever had is 24 hours, then you're a bot. I can definitely add more logic here. There's like more than one reason to maybe remove a bot, right? But this is a very simple way to maybe get there. And in between, I'm also calculating sessions, which is useful for many other things as well. But yeah, very rudimentary. This is the pipeline that you can use to remove bots. And again, because this is a Marimo data frame, one thing that I can do is I can look at this cached pipeline over here. Like this is the heavy computation. I'm trying to do that only once. But then I can take this remove bots step and I can have a look at this max session hours, right? And one thing that I could do is I could say, well, that max session length, the slider is down below over here, but that max session length is a slider that I can move around. And when I do so, there's a few things I can actually go ahead and update. And I think if I toggle the app view, and let's also, let's refresh this actually. Oh, that's off. Oh, yeah, okay. I was probably doing too many computations at the same time. Let's just restart this notebook. Like, I need to fix that. I was sliding really quickly just there, and in doing so, I was triggering lots and lots of updates, and one of those updates was calculating a heavy session. So let's just maybe not do that. And yes, so actually let's I'm not doing anything with that session thing, so let's just move that there. Then people can see it because I think my face is in the way. But one thing I can just very quickly do, let's just also not show this, right? But I've got a chart over here that shows, and yeah, that's great, but let's also not show the code over here. That way it fits in one screen. But what you can see over here is a Altair chart. And again, I'm hooking up this slider with the sessionized code. The orange line is the original, and the blue line is when I remove the bots. You're looking at the date, and you're looking at the number of rows that we have on that date. And one thing that you can see is if I say, okay, the maximum session length is 24 hours, then yeah, a bunch of traffic sort of goes away. There's a bunch of rows where we remove a bunch of bots. And if I were to maybe tune that down, maybe say something along the lines of, well, if the max session length is 13 hours and then I think you're a bot, oh boy, do we throw away a whole lot of data. This could mean two things. It could either mean that we have lots of bots, or it could mean that very long sessions is actually normal behavior. And I was actually kind of surprised by it, but one thing I should also remember is this max session threshold that I've set, technically that only has to happen once. So if for whatever reason you spent 12 hours straight this one time in 2007, then for the rest of your life, I'm going to assume you're a bot. So maybe the way that I'm filtering a bot here, maybe this technique only works if I indeed have a very, very high value. But if I remove all the characters that have had a session that was at least 24 hours, then I seem to lose about 9% of all the traffic, which is actually quite substantial. I didn't expect that when I went into this. Anyway, one thing that's also quite interesting is that when I go at the end over here, you can see that we lose a bunch of traffic at a bunch of places, but the main place we lose a bunch of traffic is at the end over here. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think this is when an expansion pack also came out. And it could be the case that people were so excited for this expansion pack that they just went all in, did all-nighters, and that therefore what was bot behavior before became normal behavior over here. This is also the hard part about detecting bots. Bot behavior can change as normal behavior changes as well, and it will always be a bit of a cat and mouse game. But again, I built a pipeline. I can now sort of try to infer if my understanding about bots is correct, and, you know, good times is what I'll say. We are starting to get close to time. There was this other segment that we could maybe talk about sometime later that's about churn. The main thing I guess I would like to mention about that's maybe good to mention. If you're gonna maybe think, okay, I've got some label now maybe for which characters are bots, right? Like, can I maybe use that to train a machine learning model? Be very careful, because what you are going to inevitably do is you're gonna have some sort of label that says, okay, we have information about a user here. Yeah, so you're gonna calculate features about a user. Let's say, how many sessions did you have in total, right? But typically, what you want to do in a situation like this is you want to do cross validation, which means you're going to have some sort of a cutoff here. And then you want to say, okay, this is what I know. This is what I'm predicting. Can I predict bots in this area looking at the data in this area? And one thing to be very careful for is the moment you do a group by and you do something like count all the sessions, then you want to make very sure that you're never going to use the time from the future in order to calculate those features, because that might cause a data leak. I've seen that happen a whole bunch. I've seen it in bot detection, but especially in churn detection, which is also a use case here. Like, if you're interested in, okay, here's a cutoff date. Can we predict which players from this time are going to come back, let's say 2 weeks later? Okay, you want to calculate features per player. That's all very well and good, but those features should never come from the future. If you're going to calculate the maximum number of sessions, if a lot of those sessions happened over here, then that's something that you're not allowed to use when training your machine learning algorithms. That's just something to always keep in the back of your mind. Oh yeah, Polars is definitely parallel, by the way. So you can set up Polars to use a single CPU core if you want. I believe if you're using WASM, this is definitely a... actually, I don't know for sure, but I think if you're using WASM, I wouldn't be too surprised that the browser constrains the number of workers that you get. But yeah, Polars is definitely... it can do parallelism across one machine. If my understanding is correct, the Polars people are working on a cloud product right now that allows you to do multi-machine parallelism as well. But Polars, as far as I'm aware, is a single machine parallelism solution only. A really nice one, I should add. I really love it. But it is a... yeah, it's definitely way faster than pandas. And also, you can come up with silly benchmarks that do sessionization, and you can see all of your cores go vroom. That's also, fun to see. I guess a good call to action. I hope people enjoy this. Feel free to give me any feedback that you might have on our Discord. We're keen, like this whole live streaming thing is a bit of an experiment. We're trying it out, see if the shoe fits. And if people like it, we'll continue to do it. But if there's feedback, now would be a great time to tell us. But there is also a call to action that I think I would like to give people. That is that you can go to marimo.app now /AI. And the thing that's just really cool is that right now we have a bunch of OpenAI credits that we have to spend before the end of next month, I think. And what you can do here is you can one-shot a entire Marimo, not Jupyter. You can one-shot a entire Marimo notebook here. So there's a couple of examples that we've listed, right? So one thing you can do is you can plot a 3D surface. That 3D surface, that prompt, that is being used to generate this notebook. And again, this entire notebook was generated from scratch. And, you get something that's nice and interactive. But you don't just have to use our things that we've filled in ourselves. You can definitely maybe do this on your own prompt. So let me maybe think of one on the spot. Do an analysis on what country wins the most Olympic medals. The reason I'm going for this query is because I've noticed that we're using, I think we're using the OpenAI backend. The OpenAI backend is sometimes clever enough to actually, let's hope this works. There, amazing. This is cool. Yeah, so the LLMs these days, they've memorized some URLs where there's been some good CSV files. And one thing I just thought was particularly cute. A lot of these CSV files that are used in tutorials, they appear in books, and they also appear on blogs, and that's probably also why OpenAI is aware of them. But it also means that if you really want to zero-shot a notebook that is actually using data, it's actually not that much of a stretch these days, because sometimes they conjure up the right URL. So Yeah, if I look at this, it feels kind of accurate. I have to hope that the data set, of course, is not been tampered with, right? But um, yeah, Olympics DF, we can play around with it. But this is the feature. This is the new thing that we made a while ago, and we would hate for this feature to not be fully utilized before the compute credits are done. So again, if you're interested in using something like this, go to marimo.app/AI, and then you're gonna be able to zero shot an entire Python notebook, which is super fun. So definitely check that out. If there are any questions about this live stream, I'm also in our Discord. I will also share this notebook and people can play with it. I hope this was useful. Leon in Vietnam, I hope you have an amazing vacation there. Feel free to stop watching this live stream and go enjoy your proper holiday. But again, thanks everyone for listening. We'll probably be back next week with another topic. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week. I might talk about any widgets. That's something that is on my radar. I would maybe want to talk about like how do you construct a proper any widget from scratch. I think that will be a fun tutorial. But you can also come to my our Discord, and we'll talk about potential topics as well. The topic for next week is not decided yet, so definitely feel free to make comments if you like. Thanks for listening.